Hi everybody, how you doing? My name is Dan, I'm a jazz shepherd. In the middle of moving here. I'm moving next month, so it's been a little hectic. It's been a little hard getting my focus on here, but we gotta keep the series moving. Today we're gonna cover Capitol Records, the giant on the West Coast, and Capitol's legacy is wrapped up very much in the Rat Pack, and they had a lot of success with the Rat Pack. I can't condemn them for that, but I certainly will condemn them for their lack of racial integration. There's not a lot of chances taken at Capitol Records. It's a label dominated by Sinatra, by Dean Martin, by Peggy Lee, and I love all that stuff. It's fun to play, and in most events, I can always put them in on some Saturday brunch gig somewhere, you know, it's fun stuff. But when it comes to the jazz and the jazz canon, we're going to look at what Capitol does, and it's going to be shocking just how watered down and milky their actual jazz releases are. They're pretty few and far between. I'm starting with the Serge Chaloff record, guy out of Boston. He's a great player. You know, white guy, obviously. He plays a lot with Al Cohn and Brookmeyer and some of those cats out there. This is a great record. The original goes for a couple $100 if you can find an old nice Capitol version of it. But that's the kind of jazz Capitol's putting out in the 50s. What they're giving you a lot of, almost ad nauseum, is this guy. Frankie Sinatra, all day long. You know? He got stuff that goes back to the 10 inches, but his 12-inch LPs on Capitol, I think they're all fantastic, especially the late 50s stuff. I think when he goes to reprise, there's a little more schlocky in there, but pretty much all the stuff he does here on Capitol Records, and that's just some of it. And then going into the 60s as well, his discography is immense. Dean Martin, of course, his sidekick, and I like Dino for different reasons, you know. Dino has a real kind of almost comedic touch to a lot of the same stuff that Sinatra will do, and he plays on that drunken kind of character as well, which I always enjoyed. Love Peggy Lee. She's out of North Dakota. She's hard not to have a crush on. She's adorable, she's cutesy, but she's not very jazzy very often. Like Columbia, Ellington was a safe choice. You could always go back to that. Stan Kenton has a lot of records on Capitol. A lot of great white musicians played in his orchestra, and they go on to make some great records of their own. Kenton's stuff is great, but again, it's not risky in any way at all. Like Ellington, Coleman Hawkins was a guy you could put out safely and not have to worry about the rednecks in Arkansas getting upset. Another Italian guy, Louis Prima. Love his records. Very fun. He swings hard. He swings harder than Dino, you know, but it's very pop swing. There's two great songs on here. Just a Gigolo, I Ain't Got Nobody, and Jump, Jive, and Wail, which most people are going to recognize both those songs. They're kind of ubiquitous in films. They show up in soundtracks quite frequently. They create a tempo and a color. That's what Capitol does. They don't really dig too deep into jazz. Nat Cole, not very jazzy, great, and black even. But like with RCA, with Belafonte, if we're going to do something that's African American, we got to make that Negro look real clean, make him bathe real good, put a lot of makeup on his face. You know, it's almost embarrassing. June Christie, Dakota Staton, both great players that put out quite a bit of stuff on Capitol Records. Hank Jones has 2 or 3 records on Capitol. Not his best records, but it's Hank Jones, one of the great players that was on thousands of records. Marion McPartland, another great piano player, a great female jazz player, but you don't get a lot of that. But again, she's white, so there's no risk there, you know. Joel Bushkin, for Peggy Lee. There's a lot of that stuff that comes out, and there's just a ton of schlock. you know. And I love old Capitol records. I grab them when I see them. I have probably 100 old Capitol albums, but they're less than Columbia by quite a degree. There's not a ton of great jazz canon here, you know, and a lot of what people think of as jazz has been influenced by these major national-wide labels doing this watered-down, diluted jazz and trying to pawn it off on people like this is jazzy, but it ain't that Negro music. It ain't that conscious spiritual protest music. It ain't the life of jazz that Blue Note was issuing. You're not going to find that on Capitol. You're not going to find that on RCA or Decca. And even on Columbia, which is the best of the bunch, you're going to get a lot of watered down, safe jazz by white players and occasionally a black player that's doing something safer than the white cats. They'll let a white cat like George Russell take more risk than they will a black cat. And, you know, so again, that Jazz Messenger record that you see on Columbia in 1958, that is out of character. That is a complete departure of all these major major nationwide labels. What they do for jazz in the late 50s especially is pretty much crap. There's some good stuff, and I'm not saying don't buy it. I love Al Cohn, I love Bill Perkins, I love a lot of those records, you know what I mean, Shorty Rogers, a lot of good stuff, but it's being completely affected by the bottom line in this country. And part of why I wanted to make this series is I really wanted to show people, once you start to collect things by the label, just how safe and conservative the major labels are in the late 50s versus what the small labels were doing. And now that we're wrapping up season 1 and we've seen what's happened throughout the mid to late 50s in jazz and even in the major labels, it really makes that canon of Blue Note releases that much more hallowed, that much more sacred. This is the temple of raw shit. You know what I mean? This is the sacred cult of the sun god of moon. Like, it's, I can't even say it enough. What Blue Note, Alfred Line and Frank Wolf and those guys did was risky as fuck. They were taking some big chances, letting these guys get in there, talk, feel and emote, and express that on the wax for time infinity. It's out there. The world now knows what we did. And if you're conscious enough and empathetic enough to feel and hear what cats are saying, that's a strong indictment. This is the one outlier, of course, for Capitol, Reversal of the Cool. And it was recorded in a couple different sessions back in 49, 50, 51. And by no means a Miles Davis session. He's been given a lot of the credit for it at this point, and his name has been attached to most of the releases of it. But this wasn't a Miles Davis session. This was a collection of forward-thinking musicians trying something a little different. You know, the birth of the cool, the birth of the West Coast. These players were from both coasts, and Gil Evans had them in New York, and they made these recordings that becomes the birth of a new sound in jazz. And everyone's so quick to say, oh, Miles Davis, he's this innovator that did it. No, he was part of it. He was always smart enough to be part of what was happening. Whether it was bebop, whether it was hard bop, whether it was modal, whether it was cool, whether it was fusion stuff, he always saw what was happening and knew he needed to be part of it, because he wasn't going to get by on just being a great player, because that's never what he was. He was a great band leader, great arranger, decent composer, always had good players around him, but he was smart enough to see the big picture. And he's incredibly important in jazz. I might sound like I'm diminishing him. He's incredibly important because he's the entryway for most people into real jazz. The first black jazz player most people will purchase will be a Miles Davis record. So kudos for that. That's a great thing, you know? But at the same time, because he's so broad, because of his Columbia exposure, he's kind of ascended to the top of the jazz pyramid in most historians, especially people who weren't even alive then. But when you see all these labels and all these discographies, and you recognize the chronological timeline of what's happening, He's not at the forefront of any of this. He's in the middle of it. And he's smart enough to put his name on it and make it look like he's part of that innovation. And he probably is a part of it. You know? But he's borrowed all along the line from people. He's seen other innovations. And then he's the one who's kind of brought him to the mainstream. Thus, he's been given a lot of credit. But it's a little bit like Will Smith or someone like that, who's made rap very safe and widespread. 50 years from now, I'd be giving credit as one of the greatest MCs ever. And he's the king of hip hop. You know, I love Will Smith. Summertime's one of the great songs ever. But there was a lot that came before him and a lot of riskier stuff going on around him. And there's no question Will Smith was making films, television, and music for white America to feel safe with black America. And that's okay. But Miles Davis plays some of that same role. And one of the interesting sidebars on Miles Davis is I honestly feel like he resents, almost hates white America. Being from a bougie middle class, black upbringing, and still being treated like an N-word every step of the way, I feel like he resents and really... Even when he's on Columbia making records, he knows white people are the only people buying these records. I think he's giving us all a giant F you. Fuck you, white America, buy my music so I can make money and take out white girls on dates in my fancy white-driven cars. But I don't think he ever really embraced his role. I think there's a real dark side to him. He's one of the most interesting characters in jazz, without question. And I'm going to do a whole episode on him coming up because I have a lot to say about Miles. And I have 75 Miles Davis records. He was my first jazz great, without question. But the deeper I've dug, he's not a virtuoso. He doesn't play fast tempos great. You know, he plays the muted trumpet as well as anybody, emotes well at mid and slow tempo, and recognizes innovation and adapts it into his own thing. So he's very much a chameleon. But that aside, finishing up here, the major labels do play an important role in jazz because they take a watered down version of jazz and put it across the country for everyone to be exposed to. And we see the same thing happen in rap and R&B. You know, the major labels will take a safer version of it and package it, but they're not going to put out the riskier stuff, you know. And parental advisory, be careful. You know, this could be kind of black. And shame on us all for being stuck in this distraction called race. You know, I talk about race a lot. I've lived and worked in the black community a lot the last 15, 20 years as a DJ. I've learned a lot about that experience. And I've also learned a lot about the misconceptions and perceptions that exist. And it's just time for us to move forward. I appreciate you all for watching me. Subscribe to my channel. My name is Dan. I'm the Jazz Shepherd. Y'all have a great day. Peace.